trade recap number 2. This is going to be on Monday, 4/14. As you can see, $943 on 4/14, which is that Monday. I'm making this video on Tuesday, so yesterday. This trade was a 2.5 hour trade, something like that. So pretty much was done by 11:30 Central Time. This is on one trade. That's it. No 2, 3, 4 trades. No, just one single trade. I'm big on, keeping it simple and not over trading. Trying to just stay within the 1 to 2 trades per day kind of rule that I made. But yeah, let's get straight into it. This is pretty much only a specific strategy I take daily, which is the pre-market high and pre-market low break and retest. If you want me to make a video on the strategy I take and go in depth with that, drop a comment. I'll make a video soon on that alone. And then also, if I look and show you the chart, I do have the indicators pulled up as well. And if you aren't familiar with that, drop another comment. I'll make a video on how I use the indicators. It's myself, since everyone uses them differently. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. So obviously every morning I do go through a specific number of stocks, right? So on the right here, as you can see, I have a pretty short list of names I look at for day trading specifically. Pretty much you'll notice that a lot of the names are very common, right? So you'll see Netflix, Tesla, Google, Microsoft, all those big kind of names that are very liquid and very actively traded, just because when you're day trading, you want to be, you want to be able to make sure that you're getting in and out of trades as quick as possible, getting filled in and out of trades. So that is one thing I am big on, is making sure I'm not trading, something that isn't, or something that's very hard to get in and out of, right? So I stick to just a few selected names. So pretty much all I do in the morning, right, before the market opens, I'll go through a list of all these and then break them down into like 2 or 3 that I'm watching closely throughout the day. So in this case, I did take the trade on SMCI. Oh shit, did I mean to do that? So I took the trade on SMCI. As you can see, I have the pre-market highs marked off here, right? So pretty much the pre-market high is just the highest point the stock it was at in the pre-market session, right? Which is that yellow shaded area, right? You can see the pre-market high and the pre-market lows. This is the smallest or the lowest point the stock was at and the highest point, right? Simple, right? All you gotta do is mark off that those 2 points there, and then from there we can pretty much just wait patiently for either side of the market to break, right? What you do want to avoid, right, as an options trader is pretty much just avoiding chop, right? So for me, if the price is just inside this range, I avoid it, because as an options trader, right, you do want to avoid the chances of your contracts losing value, right, which is the Greeks or the theta, right? You have to avoid the potential that your contracts are going to lose value, right? So if you're day trading, you want to, that's probably the most important thing, is you want to avoid taking unneeded losses, right? So don't want to trade any chop. You want to trade trend, and pretty much if we don't break either side of these, we aren't going to trend in any direction. So let's get straight into it. So all I'm doing is waiting for one side or the other to break. Keep that in mind, right? So the first 5 minutes, we do get that open straight to the pre-market low, right? Still inside the range, we don't take it. We get that break there, and then immediately break back to the upside. So there was no break and retest yet. Still inside the range, right? So it took about a couple, I think like 45 to an hour of just inside this range here. Again, right, we're coming right back down to it. We, basically supports again. Still inside the range, right? So this is actually an hour and a half into the day, or an hour into the day, but at this point, and then I think exactly here. Okay, so this is exactly when I started to look at entering to this trade specifically. We didn't get the break down out of the pre-market low. right? So this is a little bit of a twist, but what I do notice at this point, right, we are starting to set up where I can enter this a little bit early, right? So I can catch that better entry than getting at a, waiting for the breakdown and then the retest. I can get a little early and get the play, get into this trade before the big move happens, right? And that's because I did notice that we do have a bear flag forming right at the pre-market low. This is just giving me a indication that we are relatively weak compared to the rest of the market, right? If we go look at what the overall market was doing at the same time, we were kind of trending kind of towards the upwards, right? We weren't really trending up, but we were, moving somewhat up until that point. So as as the Qs were kind of trading up here, SMCI was at the lows here, so we can kind of identify that this is a relatively weak stock. So now that we had that third kind of test in an hour, right, at this pre-market low here, this just indicates that there's really no buying coming in here, as this price is just not moving anywhere and pretty much just keeps retesting this pre-market low. This just kind of gives me a good indication. Plus, we had a lot of volume come in here on this 5-minute candle, right? A lot of volume, just giving me an extra indication that we are potentially about to break down out of this trend here and out of this pre-market low. And then you can see right along here on this next 5 minutes, right, we do get that retest and kind of sit right at that pre-market low. This was a good time to buy it, just because we broke out of this trend. We can get a good risk reward here on a trade, right? If we just break back above these EMAs or the moving averages here, right? We do see the moving averages get rejected, right? We did get above here on this 5 minute, and then this ugly 5 minute candle really just pushes and just completely takes out that entire move that we made here above the moving averages. So this is a good indication that we are probably going to enter, pretty much going to break down out of this little chop session that we had here the first hour. So I do enter the trade. I think it was on this 5 minute or the next 5 minutes, but either way, right, we take the trade right around this spot here. We move our stop loss to a respected kind of a good little amount right here, right? This isn't a big stop loss. I'm going to keep my stops a little bit tighter since we aren't entering on the initial strategy I have, which is just the break and the retest. We are entering a little bit differently here, but we do want to make our reward a little bit better here. So we do want to make it at least a 3 or 4 to 1 risk reward, or 5, right? Either one, whichever one works for you. We typically want to wait and take the initial first target is that low of day that we made kind of toward this area here, but this isn't a good risk reward here, so we are just going to move it down to about like a 3 or 4 to 1. I'm going to do a 4 to 1, right? So let's act as if we enter the trade here, which I think is either this 5 minute or the next 5 minutes. Regardless, right, it's kind of that same similar candle, right, sitting right at that pre-market low. And you can see the next 5 minutes does break down out of that pre-market here. And then there you go. We get that initial breakdown there. And then it's off to the races, pretty much just sitting there. I did take a trim, I think, right around this area, right, since we did kind of get right into that pre-market, or that session low here that we made that first like 15 minutes. We do take a trim here just to kind of, not get too greedy. And, you want to start to take trims as soon as you get a good potential or a good initial move to the downside. We take trims at this spot here and we move our stops to break even. That way it's a risk-free trade. So at this point, I have my stops pretty much set at break even, and we just let the rest of our position ride to our second target, right? So which is that 4 to 1 that we had at down inside there. So you see, there we go. Next 10 minutes, we get a new low here, and we just pretty much keep printing new lows, and then bang, smacks that 4 to 1 risk reward here. And then you can just have runners throughout the day run. All right. So we take a bigger chunk of our position off here, and we're just basically letting it run, right? Our last like 2 to 3 contracts here to as low as it wants to go. As you can see, it's still kind of running here. And we get that push back up, right? And I'm pretty sure right around like no, I think it was like 2. Right, we're still rejecting these EMAs here. We're still sitting below it. I'm pretty sure I sold it. The rest of my position here. So we did have our position like our last 2 to 3 contracts for a potential bigger play down to the downside, but we did stop out for a little bit less than we did make here percentage wise. But nonetheless, was a $900 trade, which took, if let me be exact, so it took about so I lied. It took 3 hours, but anyway, 3 hour trade, $900, cool with me. I mean, really, it was like a 2 hour like it was an hour and 15 minute kind of trade here. That was the big chunk of positions that I took off, and then the last 2 contracts were really nothing. But um, at that point, already had my stops or my take profit points and my stop loss set, so I didn't have to look at the chart. But I watched the chart for the first 2 hours, took a good chunk, and that's exactly how I made $900.